When it comes to PlayStation franchises, few are as big as God of War. It's been around for almost 20 years, spanning 4 different console generations, and its sequel, God of War Ragnarok, is one of the most anticipated games this year. Of course, I've been aware of God of War since it first came out in 2005, but never had the desire to play the original games as they were coming out. Fast forward a little over a decade later, and I became a new fan with the 2018 soft reboot/sequel that transported Kratos from his home in Greek mythology into the exciting and brutal world of Norse mythology. And with the release of Ragnarok being so close, over the past few months I've been playing the original God of War games for the very first time, including the main Greek trilogy, the 2 PSP prequels, and a replay of the 2018 sequel to fully understand the path Kratos has walked so far. Now, when I usually play a bunch of games in a series, you'd expect an in-review, like I did with The Legend of Zelda and Assassin's Creed, where I review each game and rank them all for your enjoyment. But that's not what I want to do today. With Ragnarok coming soon, representing the end of the Norse era, and carrying with it the assumption that Ragnarok is the end of all things, including potentially Kratos' story, I want us to truly look at Kratos, his muddied story arc, and his character growth, or possibly lack thereof, to try and answer a very complicated question that's been lingering in my mind as I played through the series. My name is Barrett COURTNEY, and today I want you to join me on this adventure to find out, is Kratos truly a better person now than he was when we first met him nearly 2 decades ago? Kratos begins his journey as a victory-obsessed Spartan, so much so that he gives up his life to Ares, the Greek god of war, when he finds himself on the losing side of a battle against barbarians.
And with this simple action, pleading to a god and giving up his entire life just to win a battle, we already see the trajectory his life takes from here on out. Ares grants Kratos' wish, gifts him the Blades of Chaos, and in return gains a new mortal servant. This leads Kratos on a blood-filled campaign to fight for the God of War, but that campaign becomes so chaotic and violent that Kratos' wife and daughter die by his own hands. He then turns from his pact and serves the other gods of Olympus, striving to one day kill Ares and earn Olympus' favor enough to have them erase the memories of his terrible deed.
Now, is Kratos fully to blame for his actions? No, not entirely. Kratos' overwhelming need for victory led him to being manipulated by a god. That obsession, we assume in the first game, is a simple mortal whim gone wrong, quickly lost him everything. When you only focus on one thing, you don't realize the harm you cause yourself and others until it's too late. And the original God of War isn't the first time Kratos is faced with reconciling his obsession for glory with a personal cost.
During the prequel PSP game Chains of Olympus, Kratos is sent on a mission to recover Helios and return light to the sky. This quest eventually leads him back to his deceased daughter Calliope, and near the end of the prequel, he's offered the choice to give up his power as a great warrior to be with her again, or to save Helios and mankind.
To no surprise, he's originally inclined to take the personal, selfish route, but Chains of Olympus offers a foil that makes him question that choice.
Persephone, a goddess forced to marry Hades, reveals herself to be the cause of Helios' kidnapping to not only end mankind, but also to end all things, including Olympus, the underworld, and therefore even Calliope in the afterlife, all for vengeance against the gods who abandoned her. Kratos realizes the destruction she could cause is too great and gives up the reunion with his daughter to save the existence of everything.
The original God of War and Chains of Olympus showcase the conflicting sides of Kratos. On one hand, we see a power-hungry and selfish man, and on the other, we see him almost as a hero for the people of Greece, a hero who can recognize when vengeance takes someone too far, except for when that someone is him. And that's why Persephone is a great foil for Kratos early on in this journey. They were both cared for and then betrayed by those they served. Before Kratos can truly make any dent in his vengeance against Ares, he sees what that same trajectory has done to Persephone. Before they fight, she calls out Kratos' selfishness and attributes it to being a main trait of mankind.
I have watched over you pathetic mortals for 1,000 years, and it is always the same. Serving yourself before the needs of others has always been your flaw.
But the thing I find so interesting about that claim is that she fails to recognize that mankind had to have learned that from somewhere, like the gods, the same ones who betrayed her for their own selfish gain. It's also a vulnerable moment for Kratos to be called out because it's one of the very few times we see him in these early games showing a little bit of humanity. And no, I'm not talking about his selfishness. We watch him have a moment as a dad just happy to see his daughter. This game is evidence that there is more to him than just a guy who yells angrily at everyone, but it also foreshadows the path he'll eventually walk down, the same as Persephone, the path of vengeance at any cost.
But to not get too ahead of ourselves, the next time we see Kratos is in the original 2005 game, closer than ever to killing Ares, who is laying siege to Athens because he's just kind of an asshole.
The entire game is about Kratos, overcome by his need for vengeance, becoming strong enough to kill a god, specifically the god of war, the god who manipulated him into horrendous acts that continue to haunt Kratos. Through the help of other gods including Athena, Poseidon, and the big man himself, Zeus, Kratos gains the strength to find Pandora's box, which grants him enough incredible power to kill Ares. For saving Athens, Athena offers Kratos the gods' forgiveness, but admits they can't just erase the memories of his past. As they make good, they offer him the role of the new god of war. This is such a pivotal moment in the grand scheme of Kratos' life. While Kratos may have planted the seed that led him to killing his own family, the god who watered the wild and uncontrollable plant is gone. Kratos exacts his vengeance, but still has to live with the weight of his actions, those that spawned from the simple desire to win a battle. Yet here he can pave a new way to lead people as a more kind god and make sure nothing like what happened to him ever happened again. With what we've seen and experienced so far, you think he would reflect on the effects that great power has. But because he's given this great power while still drowning in the memories of his past, he just becomes an enhanced version of what he already was. The gods have forgiven him, but he still can't forgive himself for what he's done. And without recognizing and actually reckoning with that inner hatred, he now sits on a throne looking for someone else to blame.
With great power comes the absolute certainty that you'll turn into a right.
Butcher may have been onto something there. Kratos can't move on from his past because he refuses to learn from it. And that's not something the other gods can magically fix. That's something Kratos needs to do on his own, but never does as a man. And so he's not much different from the terrible god he just killed and replaced. He quickly becomes the very thing he hated this entire time, a selfish god.
He constantly favors Sparta in wars, which causes an imbalance among the people and distrust from the other gods.
And all the while he harbors this rage he doesn't know what to do with anymore.
To only further fuel that rage and his need for vengeance, in the middle of his short reign as the god of war during the PSP title Ghost of Sparta, he discovers the other gods had misinterpreted a prophecy years ago, which led both Athena and Ares to kidnap Kratos' brother Deimos as a child. During the game, he's forced to kill his mother, and shortly after, his long-lost brother is killed. In this moment, Kratos is now truly alone, with no known family left, a rift between him and Olympus, and so many questions left lingering in his mind.
On top of that, he's still looking for someone other than himself to blame for everything that has happened to him. And learning about this major failing from the gods that ripped his brother from his life gives his rage a new, clear target. So with distrust brewing between Kratos and literally every other god, Zeus comes up with a plan in God of War 2 to rid Kratos of his godly power and kill him in his mortal form.
Kratos falls for Zeus's trap by once again helping his Spartans win a battle, only to be cast into the underworld.
You will never be the ruler of Olympus. The cycle ends here.
There, Kratos meets Gaia, one of the Titans who ruled the land before the gods usurped them. Gaia tells Kratos to seek help from the Sisters of Fate, who could help change the outcome of this struggle between Kratos and Zeus. Now, things don't really go well on that front, since the sisters refuse to change Kratos' fate, and in his rage, Kratos kills the three beings who are in control of all of fate in Greek mythology, finding himself with another great opportunity to revert the mistakes of his past.
The man literally takes fate into his own hands for the first time ever, and he squanders it. When you have the power to change anything from your past, that's when you should be the most self-reflective on the good and the bad that you have left behind in the world. Kratos could have taken a moment to consider what brought him so far down this path, but because he's had almost no growth so far in his journey, he's still just obsessed with victory. No matter if it's against a barbarian or the almighty Zeus himself, no matter the consequences, Kratos must come out on top. So in what should be this triumphant moment against Zeus, Kratos' unyielding desire to win leads him to killing the god who tried to help him as best as she could, Athena.
The goddess of wisdom sacrificed herself to protect Zeus, because if he dies, Olympus and everything else with it dies too. In her dying breath, she reveals that Kratos is the son of Zeus, meaning he's been a demigod this entire time. She also tells him that Zeus was fearful of Kratos killing him and continuing the cycle of patricide, in which sons are inclined to kill and replace their fathers.
The first thing I want to break down is that last bit. Zeus decided to cast aside Kratos and let other gods control and manipulate him. He did everything cruel in an attempt to keep Kratos at bay. But hatred and disdain breeds exactly that. A child grows into what you make of them. And Zeus made Kratos the exact kind of person who would want to kill Zeus. I don't really subscribe to the idea that sons are naturally inclined to kill their fathers just for the idea of power. Zeus was inclined to kill his father because Kronos was a shitty father. Kratos was inclined to kill Zeus because Zeus was a shitty father and a cruel god. He's the king of Olympus and let all of these terrible things happen to Kratos out of fear for his own life. Understanding Kratos' true nature helps us understand the lack of growth Kratos has had in these original games. Do Zeus's actions completely absolve Kratos? No. But Kratos wasn't dealt a good hand to begin with and only saw further manipulation as his life went on. Without parents to teach him to grow into a respectable person, how can we expect Kratos, especially in this moment, to have any ability to self-reflect?
Hell, he is told to his face by his own sister that if he were to kill Zeus, Olympus would die, along with the people of Greece, along with the underworld, along with Calliope in the afterlife, Persephone's exact goal.
Now, being told the severity of what Kratos could bring about, does he stop to think about what this means for everyone, including his daughter in the afterlife? He literally stopped Persephone from doing this exact thing. Wouldn't the best course of action be to find another way to resolve this? Maybe to let it all go and learn how to become a better man than his father? No. The answer for Kratos is to burn it all down.
And he does. I don't have much to say about God of War 3 because it's just Kratos fulfilling what was always going to happen between him and Olympus, now that we know who he really is and how often he's turned away from opportunities to become a better man or demigod.
He kills everyone. And what did we expect? He was pushed away by his father, obsessed with victory, manipulated by the gods, separated from his brother, forced to kill his mother, so on and so forth. Poseidon, Hades, Helios, Hermes, Hercules, Kronos, Hephaestus, Hera, and eventually Zeus, all gone. And what's left after all of Olympus is destroyed? Waters rising, a plague upon the people, no more lights? Kratos accomplished what Persephone set out to do.
The one caveat to how inevitably dour this all feels is that throughout the game, Kratos spends time with Pandora, who reminds him of hope and what that can bring to people. And it turns out that when Kratos opened Pandora's box in the very first game to fight Hades, he had taken the hope trapped inside and carried it with him this whole time.
That's sweet in theory, but just look at what hope mixed with his rage and grief did to everything.
In a last-ditch effort to maybe make up for the disaster he brought upon the world, Kratos seemingly sacrifices himself to return hope to the people. And we finally see another spark of humanity within Kratos, one we hadn't really seen since his encounter with Persephone.
But after everything he's done, is that last gesture enough? Personally, I don't think so. Instead of trying to build something better than Olympus ever could have been for its people, Kratos decides to put the responsibilities on the people after taking everything away from them. With that, the original games end in a way that leaves Kratos' personal story feeling unfinished. A lack of self-awareness leaves Kratos largely the same power-hungry, revenge-seeking man he always was. Now only he's a god killer with destruction in his wake over the course of 5 games. There's almost too much that can still be explored with Kratos because only our understanding of this character evolved throughout these games, but he himself didn't. Apparently, Sony Santa Monica felt the same way. There's so much to discuss about the masterpiece that God of War 2018 is, not only in its own right, but also as a soft reboot that isn't scared to reflect on its past. Playing the original games for the first time made me love 2018 on another level I didn't even think was possible. Originally hearing the common sentiment that Kratos was just a one-note character and didn't become interesting until this game did my perception of him a disservice. Finally playing all of these games, I personally realized that being a one-note character isn't inherently uninteresting, especially when all of the other instruments around Kratos tell him to harmonize and he refuses time and time again. The most impressive thing to me now about God of War 2018 is that it kept that idea for the soft reboot and the foundation of Kratos the same. He's still the one-note character we've always known, he's just not as loud this time around.
Against all odds, we see Kratos still alive and kicking after destroying the entirety of Greek mythology, now living in the lands of Norse mythology, where he gets another chance to have what he lost in the original games: a family.
Very quickly, we understand how much he's fumbled that second chance. Granted, we never see his relationship with Faye in practice since it picks up after her death, but still, he starts his journey off with his estranged son and a simple quest: spread Faye's ashes on the highest peak in all the realms. A simple enough task on the surface, but as we quickly discover, it's much more taxing physically and mentally than we ever could have thought.
At the beginning of the game, Kratos tests Atreus to see if he's ready for the journey ahead by hunting deer. Atreus acts too hastily at a certain point, which leads us to the moment this entire video is centered around.
I'm sorry.
Do not be sorry. Be better.
Don't be sorry, be better. A very simple demand, but is in essence Kratos saying, show me through your actions, not your words, that you have learned. Now that's kind of rich coming from the man who over and over again through his actions showed us that he is incapable of learning, right? I love that this line comes so early because it sets up the expectation that maybe Kratos has learned between now and the last time we saw him, since he's the one giving this command. And then we spend the entire game deconstructing how little Kratos has actually grown through the actions he does or doesn't take.
What we've seen before with Kratos is that, for the most part, he doesn't truly care about others' personal struggles unless it helps him personally gain something, which is ironic when you consider his hatred for the gods, who are also only self-serving.
We see how little he's grown in that regard when we take a trip to Alfheim, which is currently home to a war between the Dark and Light Elves, with the Dark Elves coming out on top.
Seeing the Light Elves so helpless at the end of this conflict, Atreus is naturally inclined to help them out if possible. But Kratos refuses to get involved unless either faction messes with his personal goal. to retrieve the light of Alfheim and continue on their quest to spread Faye's ashes. Of course, Kratos' goal leads to conflicts with the Dark Elves, who we can only assume think Kratos and Atreus are there to help the Light Elves. At the end of this smaller journey within the larger story, Kratos fights the leader of the Dark Elves, who, in his dying breath, says Kratos and Atreus have made a grave mistake. Atreus is taken aback by the idea that they possibly helped the wrong side.
But which side is in the right doesn't matter in the broader story of Kratos' journey. What matters is that it doesn't matter to Kratos. He still only fights for personal gain with no care for whoever he crosses paths with. As of this moment, Kratos hasn't been able to take his own requests to heart, his actions so as he has not learned. But that doesn't even scratch the surface of his failures as a man, god, and father.
With Kratos unable to own up to his true nature and his past to his son, Atreus develops an inner conflict he isn't even aware of, but eventually causes him to fall too ill to continue on the journey. Kratos brings Atreus to Freya for help and is told he would need to go to Helheim for a cure, but he would need something powerful enough to melt the frozen obstacles in his path, something that doesn't exist in the Norse realms.
Before I continue on, we need to address Freya. The former wife of Odin was forced to spend the rest of her days stuck in Midgard, cast out from her people and the gods she was given up to.
She's kind, insightful, and worries for others. Kratos seems to respect these things about her, especially when he only thinks her to be a mortal witch. The respect quickly fades away when he learns Freya is actually a god as well. He becomes upset and storms out of her house, and at face value, he's upset because she kept her identity a secret, giving him another reason to justify his distrust in gods.
But I honestly think he's upset for another, bigger reason. She's everything a god is not in his mind. She's proof that being a god does not mean being someone who is constantly self-serving at the expense of others. She challenges him in a way he was not ready for. You know that challenge lingers in his mind because he still trusts her enough to let her help Atreus. And it's by narrative design that this god, who reminds Kratos of what he could be, of what he isn't, is the one that sends him on a quest that forces self-reflection. Kratos cannot grow unless he owns up to his past and his mistakes, and the moment he retrieves the Blades of Chaos is only a half measure.
We see that his sister, Athena, still haunts him, and as he digs up his past, she calls out that Kratos will always be a monster. As Kratos wields the blades for the first time in a long time, he agrees with her, but at least he is no longer her monster.
Pretend to be everything you are not. Teacher, husband, father. But there is one unavoidable truth you will never escape. You cannot change. You will always be a monster.
I know. But I am your monster no longer.
This is such a conflicting moment for me. I'm sure for longtime fans, and even for myself as a newer fan, the incredible hype of this moment as Kratos retorts he is no longer a servant of Athena's while getting ready to kick some frozen ass with the Blades of Chaos is incredible. But it's also the most heartbreaking moment of the game to me. You feel this sense of victory because he's no longer serving someone who manipulated him. But who is he implying he's a servant to now? Atreus? Faye? I personally believe he thinks it's his son, but the mistake he's failing to realize is that he was never Athena's monster, and he's not Atreus' monster now. He's still his own monster, his own servant. As much as he says he's serving someone else, his actions have said otherwise. And the even bigger mistake is not recognizing that he's a monster by choice and thinking it's all he ever can be. It's almost impossible to grow if you think things will always stay the same. It's no mistake this moment in which Kratos fails to recognize once again there's an alternate path for him, a moment that is a lot of people's favorite in the game, is followed up by the section that many people complain about the most.
Once Kratos tells Atreus the truth about their godhood, Atreus quickly falls into the trappings of his father's younger, egotistical self.
I wish I had known I was a god in Elfheim. I wouldn't have felt so bad about killing so many elves.
Well, I'm not sure that's the lesson.
You've done nothing to regret. The elves forced their affairs upon us.
No, I get it now. We had god things to do, and they were in the way, dragging us into their little problems.
Again, are we just leaving that there?
It doesn't bother him at first. It must feel good to freely be who you've always been after hiding it away for so long. He can be loud again like the good old days. And because of that, he even somewhat enables Atreus and reinforces what he's been saying throughout the game.
We do as we please. Close your heart to it. We kill what's in our way. Nothing else is important. But Kratos quickly learns how exhausting it is to be around a brazenly one-note character so much like himself, and eventually pushes back. Atreus acts towards Sindri as Kratos would have in his younger days, and Kratos questions Atreus for being so needlessly unkind.
Why did you speak to the dwarf like that?
Aren't you sick of hearing about him and his brother?
Of course. But it serves nothing to make an enemy of him.
He should know the truth, even if it hurts.
It was needless and unkind.
Truth is more important than kindness.
Your mother would disagree.
She wasn't a god.
In this moment, we see the kindness from others has rubbed off on Kratos. That slight change is caused by something he has in this game he didn't before. A group of people balancing him out. Atreus, Freya, and Mimir. And because of that, the idea of being kind has seeped through the cracks.
Even before this, there's a subtle moment in Helheim when Kratos touches the chest of the creature he has to kill in order to save Atreus from his sickness.
It's not much, but it is an acknowledgement from him that this creature didn't do anything wrong, but was killed for personal gain. It's a moment of self-reflection we've never seen Kratos truly have before. The reason Kratos hasn't been able to fully self-reflect or even notice something like kindness rubbing off on him is because he's only been able to view his life through his own lens, and that's hard to do on your own when you're stuck.
But that suddenly changes when Atreus' hubris bubbles to the surface. Before it reaches its peak though, Kratos and Atreus walk the path of Tyr, the Norse god of war who sought peace and not conflict, a concept antithetical to the Greek role. Freya in Kratos' mind was a reminder of the god he could never be, and here he learns of another god who fought so hard to serve others while literally carrying his same job title.
Just knowing we're gods makes me feel so much stronger.
Maybe you feel a little too good right now. With power comes a big choice, lad. You can either serve yourself or put your godhood in the service of others, like Tyr did.
People really loved him, huh?
Aye, a god of war, but one who fought for peace. Had a reputation for being heroic and lawful, using his power and knowledge to stop wars rather than start them.
They learn a lot about Tyr inside his hidden vault, and it's right after this that Kratos truly self-reflects on his past through Atreus. They cross paths with Modi, looking defeated after being tortured by Thor, who blames him for the death of Magni, the more favored son.
Here, Atreus truly becomes his father by seeking vengeance, killing Modi just for the sake of feeling victory over another, all the while disrespecting the idea of his mother.
But we're gods. We can do whatever we want.
That's what I said to your mother, right before I gave it to her.
What are you doing?
This is a much better knife than Mother's.
Truly, in this moment, Kratos sees himself in his son, something he realizes he never actually wanted. Knowing that Atreus needs to change and knowing Atreus can change, Kratos finally opens himself to change too. Throughout their journey, Kratos burdens Atreus with the task to be better, and specifically to be better than he ever could.
But by seeing his son fail at that, and then seeing Atreus quickly realize he can be better when he's forced to reconcile with what he did, Kratos is finally able to shoulder that same burden.
It took Kratos nearly 7 games to realize that change is possible. Thankfully, Atreus doesn't take as long, and the reason Atreus is able to grow so quickly is because his father, his mentor, knows what the path of selfishness and chaos can bring.
It's all too fitting that we learn that Atreus was supposed to be named Loki, a Norse character typically depicted as selfish and chaotic. It took someone like Kratos to raise Atreus to not be that. He may be considered Loki by name to some, but he's not. He's grown into something much more than that. But can the same actually be said for Kratos?
Show me through your actions, not your words, that you have learned. By the time we get to the end of the game, we see that Kratos has truly learned the errors of his ways. Truly owning up to his flaws is Kratos' personal quest in God of War 2018. But that doesn't mean his growth is exponential. In all honesty, I think people give too much credit to Kratos' evolution in this game. I don't think he's grown by leaps and bounds, but that doesn't mean the tiny bit of growth he goes through isn't important. In fact, it's the most important. He finally realizes he has the ability to change, and that's the first step to becoming a better version of who you once were. But that work doesn't mean the journey to being better is finished. After you open yourself up to the idea of change, you still need to implement that with every action you take. Admitting you can change and actually doing it are two different things. And as we see with some of the actions Kratos takes at the end of 2018, he still has work to do.
Why do you even care? You could have walked away.
The cycle ends here. Must be better than this.
Kratos killing Baldur has a different context to it than the massacre he committed in his own mythology, yes, but just because you broke one person's cycle of destruction and violence doesn't mean you've broken your own, especially when that death will quite literally lead to the destruction and end of everything. The cycle continues for Kratos as Freya swears vengeance upon him, and in the middle of her speech, she claims Kratos can never change.
You were just an animal. Passing on your cruelty and rage, you will never change.
And the irony of this line is that at this moment, even though he honestly hasn't changed much yet, Kratos is the most open he has ever been to the idea of change and personal growth. Even though Kratos and Atreus leave Freya on bad terms, I love the fact that one of the quests intended for after the main story is fighting and freeing the Valkyries, whom Freya was once the queen of, from torment.
A quest that isn't about personal gain, but purely about helping others. I like to think it's Kratos' way of showing Freya that he can change, that he can work towards and choose to be the god that she, Tyr, and his own son naturally are. Not only is this the hardest quest because the Valkyries are physically tough to fight, but because this is Kratos' first attempt to be a better god than he was after being open to the idea of change.
And that true first step is always the hardest.
Is this what it is to be a god? Is this how it always ends? Sons killing their mothers? Their fathers?
No. We will be the gods we choose to be. Not those who have been. Who I was is not who you be. We must be better.
God of War 2018 brings back this concept of the cycle of patricide. But unlike the original games, the soft reboot demonstrates what truly causes that cycle. It's not some predestined thing without context, it's the result of a father failing his child. We saw it with Zeus and Kronos, and then again with Kratos and Zeus. But something we have to remember about Kratos is that it wasn't just his father he killed. He killed almost every family member he's ever had.
And it's fate that the one family member he has left now is the one that, through namesake, was destined to be as chaotic and destructive as Kratos once was.
But a child grows into what you make of them. We see so many fathers throughout this series fail at raising their children, and 2018 is all about Kratos gaining the tools needed to be a father. Tools he and other fathers in this series never had. Self-reflection, humility, and the knowledge that you can change if you actually try. So, has Kratos truly become better? After looking back at his entire history, it's a complicated answer, but one where I personally lean towards yes. I know when most of us think about the God of War series, especially the original games, we quickly turn to the death, destruction, and chaos that Kratos leaves behind. But I think the most important thing about the end of his story will be what he leaves behind once and for all, potentially in God of War Ragnarok, Atreus. And more specifically, what kind of man he helps Atreus grow to be. For Kratos to truly end his journey as a better man, god, and father than he was before, his final test will be to do for his son what his father could never do for him, helping Atreus surpass what Kratos could have ever hoped to be as a person. And that's how we'll know if Kratos has truly become better, because what we leave behind can and should be better than ourselves.